Nothing about the United States began with certainty. It didn't rise calmly from order or stability. It was born in fear, confusion, and defiance, at a moment when failure seemed far more likely than survival. In the summer of 1776, 13 scattered colonies stood on the edge of oblivion, facing the most powerful empire the world had ever known. They weren't a nation yet. They had no unified army, no real navy, no allies they could fully trust, and no guarantee that history would ever remember them. Across the Atlantic stood Britain, an empire that ruled oceans, commanded continents, and crushed rebellions without hesitation. What followed was not merely a war of muskets and cannons, but a brutal test of endurance, ideas, disease, intelligence, sacrifice, and sheer will. This was the moment when America either vanished into obscurity or came into existence, long before skyscrapers and stock exchanges defined New York City. It was the single most important strategic prize in North America. In 1776, it was a modest port of barely 20,000 people. But whoever controlled it controlled trade, movement, and military power along the eastern seaboard. George Washington understood this reality with painful clarity. Fresh from forcing the British evacuation of Boston, he knew that victory had been temporary. The British were coming back, and when they did, they would return with overwhelming force. As Washington's inexperienced army hastily dug earthworks along Manhattan's shores, especially near Kip's Bay, time itself became the enemy. Then the horizon filled with sails. In late June, British warships appeared off the coast like floating fortresses, their towering masts and black holes cutting through the fog. More ships followed, then more, hundreds of them, tens of thousands of seasoned soldiers, supported by the most powerful navy on earth. It was the largest expeditionary force Britain had ever sent overseas. The intention was simple: intimidate the rebellion into collapse before it could truly take form. But instead of breaking the colonies, the sight hardened their resolve. While cannons loomed over New York Harbor, another battle was unfolding hundreds of miles away in Philadelphia. In locked rooms and hushed conversations, 56 men debated an act that would brand them as traitors if they failed. Farmers, lawyers, merchants, and philosophers wrestled with a single terrifying question: could 13 colonies truly stand against an empire? Fear filled the room, but so did conviction. On July 4, 1776, they approved a document that did more than declare independence. It introduced a radical idea to the world: that power does not come from kings, but from the people themselves, endowed with rights no government could erase. Celebration was brief. War arrived at New York's doorstep almost immediately. British cannons thundered across the harbor, and the city transformed into a battlefield. Loyalists and patriots lived side by side, suspicion everywhere. When British forces landed at Kip's Bay, the American lines collapsed under relentless bombardment. Panic spread. Washington tried desperately to rally his men, riding directly into danger. But the retreat was unavoidable. Manhattan fell. For Washington, it was a crushing defeat. For the Revolution, it was a harsh awakening. The suffering deepened when fire tore through British-occupied New York, destroying nearly a quarter of the city. Thousands of captured American soldiers were packed into prison ships anchored in the harbor, where disease and starvation killed far more than combat ever had. Survival now depended on adaptation. Washington abandoned traditional European warfare and embraced mobility, patience, and deception. The revolution would not be won by standing toe-to-toe with empire. It would be won by outlasting it. That strategy paid off in places like Saratoga, where British General John Burgoyne's army marched straight into disaster. Dense forests, hostile civilians, collapsing supply lines, and relentless American sharpshooters shattered British command. In 1777, Burgoyne surrendered, an unthinkable moment that changed the war. For the first time, the world believed the Americans might actually win. France entered the conflict, followed by Spain, transforming a colonial rebellion into a global war. Yet, even with allies, the revolution nearly died that winter at Valley Forge. Hunger, disease, and cold ravaged the army. Desertion loomed. It was there, in misery and suffering, that Washington proved his greatest strength not as a tactician, but as a leader. He held the army together through discipline, sacrifice, and belief. He ordered mass inoculation against smallpox, risking lives to save the army. He built an intelligence network that turned spies, codes, and deception into weapons as powerful as artillery. By 1781, the final act unfolded at Yorktown. British General Cornwallis expected escape by sea. Instead, Washington and French forces closed the trap. Weeks of bombardment followed, then surrender. After 6 years of a war Britain never believed it could lose, the impossible had happened. The rebellion survived. The cost was enormous. Cities burned, families were torn apart, tens of thousands died. But an idea endured that ordinary people could defy empire, govern themselves, and claim liberty as a birthright. From that idea, a nation emerged. The United States of America was no longer a dream, it was real. And its story did not stop there. What followed was expansion, conflict, innovation, injustice, and transformation. From westward exploration and the Louisiana Purchase to civil war, industrialization, global wars, civil rights struggles, and technological revolutions, the United States continued to reshape itself and the world around it. Its history became one of contradictions, freedom and oppression, opportunity and suffering, unity and division. Yet through every crisis, the same truth remained. The nation was forged not in comfort, but in struggle. Not in certainty, but in risk. And not by those who waited for permission, but by those willing to stand, even when the odds were impossible. That is how America was born. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this look into history, be sure to like and subscribe for more stories like this one. See you next time.